Don't tread on us, we're not afraid. You work for us, we're not your slaves.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
I'm recovering from 2 broken legs at the moment, so I'll try not to fall off this thing. But thank you, Tristan. Thank you, brother. Thank you, everyone here, for showing up. And first of all, I'd like to say that this is not what I do. I don't stand on soapboxes on stage in public and do this sort of thing. And you know, I've literally just been writing this sitting here on the ground, and I feel obliged to be a part of this. A couple of quick questions, because I missed early on. We got caught in traffic coming down. But who's travelled to Brisbane today to get here? Yeah, most of you. Awesome. I mean, you know, despite friends and family, maybe. Yeah. And who felt more empowered by yesterday's announcement that we're meant to be restricting things again? Now, didn't that seem a fairly convenient response to, you know, these planned peaceful picnic protests? So thank you everyone for showing up for your loved ones, showing up for humanity, showing up for future generations. Who am I? Some of you might have seen me on the Vax Bus tour about a month ago. I've been sitting in the shadows watching a lot of these heroes, because that's what they are, standing up for our rights. And I didn't wake up that morning I didn't get dressed knowing that I was going to be on that bus in front of that, you know, film crew and saying those things, but it just poured out of me like everyone else is on this journey. We're not on it for fun. You know? We're not here protesting out of something that's cool to do, and I know there is a lot of that shit happening in the world right now, but that's not why we're here. We're here because we're seeing our rights just being stamped out in front of us. And so, who am I? Well, who am I not? I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I speak up against this bullshit that's happening, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer. In fact, I had a severe vaccine reaction 20 years ago, and a number of autoimmune diseases came about of it, but I still thought it was rare. You know, 6 years ago, I got a vaccination to travel to South America because I was lied to that it was compulsory, basically, and I got sick again. But I was not an anti-vaxxer. It wasn't until bringing a life into this world that I had to make a informed decision to actually look into it. And I guarantee that anyone who applies the smallest amount of rational, intelligent thought rather than just the government handout, immunisation handbook or propaganda, realises pretty quickly that the more they look into this topic, you know, the deeper the rabbit hole gets, and the more less than black and white it becomes. So I'm not anti-anything. I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-freedom. I'm a concerned member of society. Most importantly, I'm a father, I'm a husband. I can consider myself a law-abiding man and a contributing member of society. I consider myself a patriot. I've twice represented Australia in world championships of martial arts and held the Australian flag on stage. My wife and I have been to over 47 countries. We come back here thinking we're in the luckiest place in the world. We haven't travelled in the last couple of years because of what's happening and having a young kid, busy with life and whatnot. But now I'm starting to wonder, are we really in the luckiest country in the world? Are we really in the safest country in the world when we've got a government that's doing this to us? Now, in those 47 countries, I spent multiple, many-month-long trips in many different countries, Eastern Europe, South America. You know, lived in Eastern Europe for almost a year, and I learnt firsthand, visiting the sites, visiting the museums. We'd go to museums and go back the next day and then come back a third day because that's who we wanted to learn the history, and we'd speak to the older generation that had lived through World War II and post World War II Soviet systems and whatnot. And the writing is on the wall that things are rapidly happening here, and what I'm acutely aware of is that the results of government overreach and propaganda and how rapidly they can deteriorate a society into a totalitarian regime. And it happens all over the world. And people don't see it coming, it just happens, within a few months or a few years, new legislation happens. Enough of the society are too apathetic to get up and stand up for their rights, and they just get walked over, and people go, the typical Australian mantra of she'll be right. It's not happening to me, but it's happening right now in Victoria. Like, what's happening down there is an absolute crime against humanity. It's disgusting. Dan Andrews, I don't know how, I hope he doesn't sleep at night. People say, I hope he does. I hope he doesn't. I hope he never sleeps again. I hope anyone that's playing a role in this overall corruption, whether they know it or not, but particularly if they know it, I hope they know what's coming for them, because at the moment there is men and women marching in the millions overseas. We saw, and I don't watch mainstream media. I barely watch TV in 5 or 10 years. I haven't had a TV in our house for a year and a half, thank God. But I see enough of the propaganda and more so I see the conditioning of society to attack anyone who wants to speak out against this official narrative. I try to share stuff that I've put many hours of intentional thought into trying to figure out what's going on. And I'll tell you what, I can't, a lot of the guys before me articulated a lot of what's going on quite clearly, and I won't go into that because, the rabbit hole goes deep. But if we don't stand up and speak our truth and hold people to account, ask people why they're wearing a mask, why they're insisting on, they've got bloody COVID ushers or some other new name for Gestapo at the surf clubs on the Sunshine Coast. They've got, we've all got to stand in lines and socially distance and do all these things that fly in the face of logic, fly in the face of medical advice that's being accepted around the world. We're one of the few countries instigating these sort of measures. And I as a vaccine injury survivor, because I had severe reactions almost 20 years ago, and I'm grateful that I've managed to manage it. It's 20 years of study and consistent effort to be as healthy as I am, but I still struggle with it. But I guess I have a lot to be grateful for that, because that happened when I was 17, and I dropped out of school and gone back and worked, which forced me to get this bunch of vaccines which injured me. But I intended on entering the military and the police force. I'd been an army cadet. I had applied for the military, and one of the first questions was, do you have any specific medical conditions or dietary requirements? And I was newly celiac and a couple of other things going on, so of course I got the quick no, thank God. But I wanted to be I wanted to be part of the Air Force or part of the Army, and stand up for this country, protect our rights, and do the right thing. After that, I genuinely looked at going into the police force. I've good friends in the police, good people. I consider brothers and sisters, and there are many of them. They're here today. They might have been given, I don't know what was happening before, giving Tristan a hard time or not, but they're here. They're here doing what they're supposed to do, and that is to help us, to protect society's freedoms. And I'm grateful for them. I'd hate to be in their position, so I'm grateful I'm not in the police force right now. In fact, I'm grateful, I then entered university, intended on ending up in the medical system. I had a lifetime-long dream of becoming a doctor, but I quickly started to learn through my own experience in the medical system that the answers weren't there, that I was being led down a path of drugs and surgery and no hope. And for me, that wasn't an option either. And thank God, because if I was in the military all the police, all the medical system right now, I'd be at a loss. I mean, we love these guys for what they do, but at the end of the day, you know, they're following orders, and this is a message to those guys that, you know, they're up the back there. There seems to be more of them. There was 9 before, there was 12. You know, and I saw a few in the car park down there before, hanging out in their Land Cruisers. You know, I appeal to the humanity for you people that are employed within these systems. And I ask every one of you guys to appeal to that. I mean, they're generally good people that got into these forces for the right reasons. Now, I appeal to the humanity of those that are in the political, the healthcare and the legal systems, because we're here fighting for your rights as well.
Yes.
Now, you've got kids at home that if this agenda continues, the way in which our supreme leaders, because that's what they think they are, right, want this to continue, because you guys, the enforcers, they will need to make a choice. And I want everyone here to think about that and have these conversations with your friends and family that are serving in the military. Remember that word, serving, and serving in the police forces, and serving in our political systems and our legal systems and healthcare systems. But they need to make a choice. And maybe it doesn't seem that apparent now, but the way this slippery slope is running, and if this agenda keeps playing out, or this momentum keeps playing out the way it's intended, then they've got a choice, whether it's their career or their integrity that they're going to uphold. Because the one thing we know about medicine is that it's not black and white. You know, there's anyone that claims the science is settled or the medicine is settled or whatever, they can rush out a new vaccine in 7 months and it's never taken less than 7 years to bring out, is deluding themselves. You think about DDT, thalidomide, tobacco, mercury, non-ionising radiation. I mean, these are all things that were adamantly protected or deemed to be not a threat to human life, and science turned around and said it was. I remember reading 15 years ago that the average time from recent medical discoveries to get through from clinical acceptance of mainstream science through to medical practice is 17 years, right? Like, I mean, how is that in any way acceptable in this society, in the so-called information age? So, I pose some questions. I mean, and this applies to everyone here, anyone who's sitting on the fence. I mean, I was sitting on the fence, you know, and I don't want to be up here doing this. No one wants to be, you know, and I kudos to all these guys that have been on this crusade for years. You know, I never consider myself a conspiracy theorist or a tinfoil hat guy or any of these things, but I work in an industry that evaluates risk. You know, I've been in business. I haven't had anyone to answer to for over a decade. I'm fortunate. I haven't had a job to report to anyone. I don't have to worry about losing my licence or my registration or getting sacked or relying on unemployment benefits or the so-called non-mandatory situation, except if you don't concede to having your child injected with potentially life-threatening ingredients. You know, they cut your Centrelink payments off. They financially blackmail you into not having the quality of life that we think we should have in a supposedly free country. So there's a bunch of questions that most of us have asked, but we need to be asking this and asking people that are coming up with frankly irrational, illogical, emotional responses to anyone who you know dares to speak up or in any way put forward any sort of evidence or logical narrative that in any way diminishes the official narrative. And again, this is by no means a comprehensive list. I've just been sitting here sketching out these pages and trying not to cover off on too much what everyone else has covered because, you know, we need to get to the point. So, you know, there are questions that everyone needs to ask, and these are again the police up the back here. Some of you guys are paying attention, thank you. Why is legal liability to pharma being systematically removed around the world? It's already been removed since 1986 in countries like America. You know, as such, over $4 billion have been paid to injury victims. An estimate of only 1% actually report them and make it through that horrible process. where they've got to self-represent themselves against the government, which is completely unbelievable. Why are doctors and healthcare workers being bullied and threatened? How do we live in a supposed free society where a doctor can go spend their time at university, come out with a doctorate, mind you, an MD is an honorary doctorate, you know, but I do know how to read, I do know how to think logically, I do know how to you know, look for the greater agenda and the longer plan, because I'm in a business that has to plan things out years in advance. And I can't see any logic or rationale or reason behind why we live in a society now where any politician, any healthcare worker, anyone in political office that answers to anyone, or by definition thinks they have to subordinate, which they do to keep their careers, why they're effectively bullied and threatened to conform with the narrative. I mean, if the argument for what our leaders and authorities and the talking heads on media are arguing for, if their arguments are so strong, why not allow the opposition? Because they'd win it on merit. The fact that they're censoring everything, that medical practitioners are being threatened and bullied and deregistered Australia-wide, is just testament to the fact that you know, there's something not right here, that there's a clear censorship agenda. Why are politicians who are currently in office, who have intentionally deceived us, not being held to account? I mean, this has happened throughout the year. We've watched premiers and health ministers and who knows what backflip on statements. Oh, we're not going to enforce the mask. They're ridiculous. They're scientifically proven. Not now. No, we changed our mind. Now we're going to enforce the mask. You know, like, it's ridiculous. Yet, from one day to the next, well, you know, the tune will change on TV. Someone will get up, the Premier or whoever will get up and say, all right, we've decided this, we've concocted a bunch of new cases. And mind you, on that note, what do cases mean? They don't mean anything. As Tristan said before, the WHO itself said asymptomatic carriers of the COVID-19 are not likely to cause transmission. So what do cases even matter? Like, how does it even matter at all? The only metric that means anything to me is additional deaths outside of normal. And if, you know, from what I've read, it's not occurring. You know, the deaths that are occurring, tragic as they might be, we all know that they're the elderly. And people go, what about the elderly? You know, how dare you go and risk transmitting a disease that's going to kill all these elderly? Like, I guarantee most of my grandparents aren't around, but if they were, and if I was in that age group, I would gladly expose myself to some proposed virus, then be knowingly held as a scapegoat for the destruction of society. The increase in suicides, family breakdowns, the emotional assault and abuse and conditioning happening to our children right now that are growing up in a world that conditions them to think that every other person around them is a threat. They're a potential threat carrying a life-endangering disease. You know, Louis Pasteur said on his deathbed, and those are deathbed. Louis Pasteur,
thank you, darling,
was the godfather of germ theory. He invented pasteurisation and whatnot. On his deathbed, he said, "I was wrong. It's not the germ, it's the terrain." Yet the powers that be at the time held on to germ theory, and they could push this agenda. You know, the very profitable system that, you know, we know where it's heading now. And there's pharmaceutical executives that have come out stating on the record that their goal is for every person on this planet to be on 2 to 4 medications. You know, and it's happening. I mean, it's rare to find people that aren't on some sort of medications. Sorry, Tristan, long 5 minutes. Another question. What happens when our clearly incompetent, at best, I would say, authorities push the next stage of this agenda? Because they're rolling it on and off. It's been, and I was saying back in March, you know, I was joking about, I've always wondered what it was like to live in communism. And it was a bit of a smart-ass sarcastic remark, because I've lived in those former socialist states, and I've learned, and I've got family that were brought up that escaped it. But for those of us who have actually spent the time to look into that, the warning signs are out there. It's happening. Next question: what happens when mandatory invasive medical procedures come for your own family? And this is less about this question because we're all thinking about this, but we're here standing up for the rights of everyone, including the police and the politicians and the healthcare workers that think they're on the right side but haven't given it enough intelligent, rational thought, haven't looked at both sides of the debate, haven't started asking intelligent questions, and haven't realised that we're here standing up for your rights as well. I don't want to see anyone's kids taken away in the middle of the night because they haven't consented or their parents haven't consented to a violation of their principles or their right not to be injected with anything or their right not to be subject to a test or just their human rights in general. Because if you think this agenda is going to pursue the path that they're pushing it towards and it's just going to be us crazy conspiracy theorists or anti-vaxxers or whoever, which I take offence to being labelled, then you're wrong. Because as soon as we're done with, they're coming after everyone. They're coming after your kids as well, your families, your brothers and sisters. I'm sure most, I feel for the police and the military, that are being conditioned to think that they have a role to play in potentially making society conform to this. Because at the end of the day, they know they went into this knowing, they went into the forces, most of them, some of them admittedly went in for the ego, but most of them went in wanting to do the right thing. Because they think that they're not going to come for your families, they will. So every single employee of these systems needs to have a long, hard think as to whether they will prioritise their orders over their principles. So please think about it now. Please make a considered choice. Get educated. I know you guys here are. I know there's thousands and thousands of people probably watching this online right now. Get educated, speak out. Do you think I want to stand up here and do this, knowing that, I'm just creating a target for myself and my family? I don't. But if you think that we're not all flagged, every one of us who has a phone or a social media account is flagged as not wanting to conform to this. So people need to get educated. Police need to get educated. Military need to get educated. Healthcare workers need to get educated. We need to hold those people that are in our friends and family circles that work within those systems to get educated. They need to understand what the reality of the situation is versus the hysteria. They need to know their rights. They need to know our rights. I read the 2019 Human Rights Act yesterday, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I only read it yesterday. Right, the Human Rights Act of Queensland of 2019. Section 17 talks about no mandatory medical procedures can be performed without our consent. Right, full consent. And that doesn't mean coerced consent, coerced through financial reasons or whatever else. There's sections there that talk about our right to gather peacefully as well, which should have given us all confidence to come to something like this today. There is an Australian constitution. I'm sick of hearing, you see it on social media, we don't have human rights charters in Australia. We do have a Human Rights Act for Queensland. We have others. We have a Biosecurity Act 2015, which I've read parts of. And it clearly states that we have a whole bunch of rights that are clearly being impeded on at the moment. And there are definitions in there which some of those can be overruled, you might state, but those criteria haven't been met. The criteria of declaring a pandemic and a state of emergency have not been met by any rational, intelligent consideration of the matter. I mean, what have we got? I'll get onto this in a minute, but what the real epidemic here is an epidemic of fear and an epidemic of victimhood. And that's across the world right now. We have this political crazy stuff happening over in the US right now, where it's an epidemic of victimhood. Everyone's trying to be a victim. And at the moment they're playing on the idea, the media in the Western countries, from my perspective, that they're playing on the idea they can convince everyone that they're a potential victim of every other germ-carrying person in society. They're a victim of this potential pandemic coming through, wiping out their families and whatnot. On the flip side, we have those on this side of the fence curtailing to the idea that they're a victim of what is happening. And we mustn't be victims. The one thing I know about life is we have a choice. And I made this choice myself 20 years ago, whether to be a victim or whether to own my own life and decide, you know, how I think and what actions I take. And the problem is most of society is no longer deciding how they think and what actions they take. They let everyone else do it for them. And so thank you everyone here for thinking for yourself. Thank you for those, and I've had conversations with those in the military currently, those that are ex-military veterans, friends of mine, friends I train with, friends I grew up with, those that are in the healthcare system, those that are no longer in it because they couldn't handle it. A lot of them know what's going on. And they do. They do, and there's people here today that are in those systems that are here despite the backlash they might have. And the fact that they're even concerned about backlash is quite frankly a disgusting representation of where our society is at. So I ask everyone here, and I ask you guys up there, you're not in blue anymore, you more look like paratroopers and police, but the boys in blue hold each other to account, honestly. I know there's good men and women there. Which side of history do you want to be seen to have been on? There's a cost-benefit analysis in all of this, and I was making it myself, my uneducated, non-politically educated. You know, I don't have a healthcare degree, but I have 20 years of battling my own health challenges due to this medical system, and if I had gone down that route, I wouldn't be standing up here today. I did the cost-benefit analysis back then. You know, you could do it on the back of a beer coaster. What are the likely deaths from this? Worst case scenario, and what are the financial, economic, and social repercussions of this? How are they going to? What are the ramifications of those going to roll out in society as? You know, what are the total amount of deaths from suicide due to financial destruction due to this social isolation? It's been long known that social isolation causes mental illness, causes suicide, antisocial behaviour, causes increases in drug abuse and alcohol abuse, in family and domestic violence. Now, I saw a statistic early on within weeks that within the first month of lockdowns in New Zealand, the deaths from domestic violence already outnumbered the deaths from COVID. And for the political class, our leaders, our healthcare authorities and ministers, to pretend like they didn't have a clue that that was going to be the outcome back in March and April, I'm telling you, like, these guys aren't stupid. They might seem it to us, but they're not stupid. They've got teams of psychologists, teams of expert advisors that know exactly which way these things are going to play out one way or the other, and they have contingency plans in place. I've worked in big business. I know how this stuff plays out. You think about contingency plans, the way things are going to move forward. And for most of society to be seemingly ignorant of the fact that this wasn't entirely predictable, this destruction of our economy, of small business, this intentional wiping out of the middle class, which ultimately leads to a dependency on social welfare structures, which will come with terms that we don't even know what. At the moment, we know that if you're on Centrelink benefits and you want, we all know bullshit. That those who want to have a choice about the medications that our children are inflicted with have to go through if they need social benefits. And now there's I don't know the numbers, but it's obvious that reliance upon welfare has dramatically increased. And that's, completely predictable and in my opinion, engineered to be that way, because we don't even know what. Yeah, the government. ScoMo quickly backflipped the other day. He obviously got told, spit this one out, see how. Let's press this social button, see how the people tolerate your underhanded suggestion of a mandatory vaccine. But in my opinion, that backfired, and it didn't take. I turned on notifications on the right. We've got the likes of Sky News, which is unbelievable. I mean, I've never been a fan of Alan, what's his name, Jones, right, or the other guys, right? But they're the only guys in mainstream media with the balls to stand up right now and say it how it is. So they're becoming I'm becoming a fan of theirs quite rapidly. Now, there's any other journalists out there that have the integrity to put the truth in front of their career, to call out these lies for what they are, and to try and hold these politicians and these, I don't know who these health ministers are. Like Alona said before, we didn't vote them in. And how is it that we get a media release that says, all right, we've decided this, my health minister says this, who the hell's telling her what to say, yet no one questions it? Why is there not a public, open forum, a debate? If they're going to make a call like restrictions and lockdowns and try and utilise the police and the military to enforce that, which, mind you, is unlawful against the people from my readings of the Constitution. If they're going to do that, shouldn't that decision be made in a public forum on live TV so that the public are aware of who's calling the shots, who's stating what, and there can be validated opposition and debate, actual debate, because right now I'm not seeing any debate of any of these measures taking place. There's no debate. There is just a new media release causing a whole heap of fear and pandemic in society, and then, all right, we're doing this. But none of it's based on reality and truth. So again, please hold our friends, hold our family that operate within these systems. Hold them with gratitude that they are there and that they generally have the intention to do the right thing for society, but hold them to account. Hold them to account that we are counting on them when push comes to shove, if the right thing needs to happen, and we're in a society that is rapidly changing. I mean, the only thing that I'm fearful of is not some supposed virus, and I'm not denying that it exists, right? But I'm not any more concerned of it than any other coronavirus that circulated any other year. Right, and most of the world shouldn't be, and the countries that didn't, that operated along those lines are showing that to be the case. What I am concerned about is this seemingly unstoppable government overreach. We have a state of Australia that's committed treason against its citizens and against the rest of Australia. We've got other states making sounds that are, that they're going to follow suit, and we have the general population accepting it, taking it on the nose and going, oh, she'll be right, it's not really affecting us. But I'm telling you what it is, and anyone who's listening online or anyone who's on the fence, it's coming for all of us. And if we don't have the guts to speak up, then who knows where it's going. So, got to wind up. Thanks, everyone. Sorry, Trick, but thanks for hearing me out. And look, hold everyone to account.
Don't tread on us, we're not afraid. You work for us, we're not your slave.